It was just past 9 a.m. when Elias Thorne, the youngest tech billionaire in the country, stood at the top floor of his glass fortress, the Thorne Tech Tower. His watch, a limited edition piece worth more than most people's homes, ticked softly. As he scanned the skyline with hollow eyes, he had everything: luxury, women, yachts, a reputation that could shut down entire markets with a whisper. But that morning, none of it felt real. The board had just declared war. His closest friends on the executive team had turned on him. Rumors were spreading that he was manipulating stock prices, using insider information, and laundering through shell companies. None of it was true. But when you're a billionaire, truth takes a back seat to perception, and Elias had made enough enemies to know this was coming. He could have fought back. With enough lawyers and favors, he would have survived the scandal. But that wasn't the point. He needed something else now. Something he hadn't felt in years: honesty, humanity, something not bought, not faked. And more than anything, he wanted to know if anyone could love him without the name Thorne attached. That night he left the tower. No press release, no goodbye. Just one black hoodie, some worn jeans from a thrift shop, and a fake identity. He moved into the east side of the city, where people didn't ask many questions, and nobody cared about billionaires who suddenly looked like broke nobodies. There he found work at a janitorial service. The owner, a guy named Calvin, paid cash under the table and didn't bother with background checks. Calvin just looked Elias over, grunted, and said, "You break a mop, it comes out of your pay." And so began the billionaire's new life, scrubbing floors in office buildings that looked like mini versions of the empire he once ruled. 3 weeks in, the smell of bleach no longer bothered him. His hands, once polished and manicured, were rough and cracked. The silence was heavy but freeing. No emails, no sycophants, no boardrooms, just him, a mop, and his thoughts. Then he met her. Her name was Marla. She worked the morning shift at the same building he cleaned at night. She was a maintenance supervisor. Nothing fancy, just someone who kept things running. Someone who actually gave a damn about people. Elias noticed how she treated everyone with warmth. Even the vending machine guy, even the trash collector. One night, he saw her staying late to help a new janitor who was struggling with a clogged toilet. No complaints, no eye rolls, just kindness. That night, Elias stayed back, pretending to fix a light fixture just to watch her. Marla was no supermodel. She had tired eyes, rough hands, and always wore the same 2 flannel shirts on rotation. But there was something in her, a quiet strength, a realness he hadn't seen in years, and for some reason, it made his chest tighten every time she smiled. One Friday evening, he finally spoke to her. "You always work this hard?" he asked, leaning on his mop, trying not to sound like a stalker. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Only when the lazy ones slack off." He laughed, and it caught her off guard. "I'm Elias," he said. "Marla." They shook hands. Hers was warm, real. From that day on, they started talking more. Little moments. Jokes between shifts. Silent nods in passing. He never told her who he was, and she never asked. She just treated him like someone worth talking to. Not someone to impress, not someone to use. Elias found himself craving those conversations more than he ever craved $1 million deal. But the deeper he fell, the more he feared what might happen if she found out the truth. Would she hate him? Feel betrayed? Or worse, would she start treating him like everyone else did when they knew his last name? He didn't want to ruin it. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and in the background someone was starting to recognize his face. Elias found himself arriving early to his shift, something he never imagined doing in his former life. But it wasn't the job that brought him in. It was her. Marla had this way of making dull evenings feel like something out of a forgotten dream. A joke here, a short story about her childhood there. It was enough to make a man forget the weight he carried on his shoulders. They shared meals now, nothing fancy. She brought leftovers, always enough for 2. And Elias, who used to dine with billionaires in rooftop lounges, found himself cherishing her Tupperware spaghetti more than any 5-star dish. She even laughed at the way he couldn't use a microwave without setting something on fire. "You rich boys really don't know how to survive, do you?" she teased one night. Elias froze for a second. "What makes you think I was ever rich?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. Marla shrugged. "You've got soft hands for a janitor. At least you did. And you talk like someone who's been to college. You're not like the rest of us." He felt something twist inside him. Was she suspicious or just observant? Before he could respond, she smiled. "But I won't hold it against you. We all fall from somewhere." Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. She didn't push for more. That was the kind of person she was. She respected silence, didn't dig through wounds unless you handed her the shovel. He respected that more than she would ever know. Over the weeks, their bond grew. One rainy evening, they found themselves stuck together in the building's break room during a late-night thunderstorm. The city outside was soaked in flashes of light and roaring wind. Marla sat cross-legged on the old couch, sipping coffee. Elias leaned against the vending machine, arms folded. "You ever been in love?" she asked suddenly, catching him off guard. He blinked. "Once," he said honestly. "Didn't end well." "What happened?" "She fell in love with the version of me that wore a mask, not the man underneath." Marla studied him for a long second. "Sounds like you weren't lying, just hiding." He nodded slowly. "Exactly. And now?" He glanced at her, then away. "Now, I'm tired of hiding." There was a silence between them, not awkward but full. She didn't ask more. Instead, she offered him half her muffin. "You're getting better at opening up," she said with a wink. But outside the bubble they'd built, the real world was stirring. One of the security guards at the building, a guy named Trent, had been watching Elias for weeks. Something about the way he carried himself didn't sit right. Too calm, too polished. Trent had a brother who worked private security for high-profile clients, and just 2 days ago, he sent him a blurry photo of Elias wiping down elevator buttons. The reply was instant. "That's Elias Thorne, no doubt. What the hell is he doing dressed like that?" Trent didn't say anything at first, but curiosity and the need to be the guy who uncovered something big got the best of him. He started following Elias, asking questions, quietly taking pictures. Meanwhile, Elias remained unaware. One night, as he walked Marla to her car, their fingers brushed. She didn't pull away, neither did he. They didn't say much, but something was shifting. He could feel it. A kind of warmth creeping into the coldest parts of him. He'd fallen, and this time it wasn't from wealth or pride. It was into something deeper, something terrifying. Love, but secrets don't sleep forever. And Trent had just made a call to a gossip journalist hungry for dirt. By morning, the truth would start to bleed out. The morning came heavy with storm clouds and headlines. Elias woke up in his tiny rented room, a far cry from the penthouse suite he once called home, and checked his old burner phone out of habit. The screen lit up with dozens of missed calls and texts from names he hadn't seen in over a month. But it was the news alert that made his heart sink. Billionaire Elias Thorne disappeared weeks ago, now spotted. Working as a janitor. Below the headline was a grainy photo. Him, holding a mop, laughing with Marla just outside the building's side entrance. His chest tightened. The photo was zoomed in and blurry, but there was no mistaking it. The secret was out. He rushed to get dressed, heart pounding. There was still a slim chance Marla hadn't seen it yet. Maybe he could explain before someone else poisoned her, with assumptions. But it was too late. When he arrived at the building, the energy had shifted. People were staring, whispering, laughing quietly behind their hands. He caught a glimpse of Trent smirking from the security desk, his phone held casually in his hand like a trophy. Elias ignored them and made a beeline for the maintenance office. Marla was inside, standing by the window with her arms folded. Her phone screen was lit up, showing the same article. She didn't turn when he entered. "Marla," he started, voice low. "You lied to me," she said softly. "I never lied," he replied. "I just didn't tell the whole truth." "Oh." She turned around then, her eyes stormy. "You let me believe you were just some guy trying to make ends meet. I shared things with you, Elias. Real things. I trusted you." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "And everything I told. Everything I felt, it was real. I didn't want you to see the billionaire, I wanted you to see me. She shook her head. That's not how it works. You can't test people like that. You can't set up some emotional experiment to see if someone loves you for who you really are. You played me. Her words hit like bullets, sharp, honest. I wasn't playing you, he said quietly. I was hiding. From my old life. From the people who ruined it. I was broken, Marla. You helped me feel whole again. She stared at him for a long moment. You should go. He didn't argue, just nodded and walked out. That night the city felt colder, the streets louder. He sat in a diner 2 blocks away from her building, nursing a coffee he couldn't taste. The article had gone viral. Reporters were showing up near his old tower. Investors were speculating. Some called it a breakdown, others called it genius. But none of that mattered. The only person whose opinion he cared about had shut the door on him. Still, life doesn't pause for heartbreak. A few days later, Elias was summoned back into the corporate world, whether he liked it or not. One of his former legal advisors found him, in person, and pleaded for his return. The board was panicking. Investors were pulling out. And ironically, the article had sparked public sympathy, painting Elias as a misunderstood soul rejecting wealth to live among the people. Stocks had dipped, then suddenly soared. Come back, the lawyer said. Ride the wave, clean your name. The world's rooting for you now. But Elias didn't care about the wave. He just wanted to talk to her again. He wanted her to believe he wasn't some manipulative millionaire playing poor for fun. He wanted her to know he'd fallen in love with her, long before she ever knew his name. And so he made a decision. He would return, not to reclaim his empire, but to earn her trust the right way. But Marla had already quit her job. No one knew where she'd gone. And just like that, she vanished from his world. The world was watching Elias Thorne again, but he didn't care. His return to Thorntech sent shockwaves through the business world. Journalists hounded him for interviews. Former enemies in boardrooms suddenly smiled again. Overnight he was hailed as a revolutionary billionaire, a man of the people. They called his fall a social experiment, a genius PR move. They didn't know the truth, that he'd give it all up again just to find her. He sat in his office, surrounded by sleek glass and polished steel, but everything felt empty. The moment Marla left, color drained out of his world. He tried to move on. For a week he did nothing but work, revived old projects, fired the snakes who tried to oust him, gave back salaries to laid-off employees. People praised him as a changed man. But every night his thoughts went back to her, to the way she smiled with her eyes, the way she never pitied him, never treated him like a man who was less. She had loved the janitor, not the billionaire, and that made her the only person whose opinion could break him. He hired a private investigator, not to stalk her, but just to know if she was okay. It took 3 days, but finally, a report landed on his desk. Marla had moved 2 towns over, working at a small flower shop owned by her aunt. No social media, no phone number listed, no sign of her wanting to be found. Elias didn't hesitate. He got in his car that evening, no driver, no entourage, and drove 3 hours in silence. The shop was small, a white-painted cottage, with flowers spilling from the porch and vines climbing the walls. It was a place that looked untouched by the noise of the world. A quiet life, the kind he used to laugh at. Now it felt like paradise. He didn't walk in right away. He stood outside across the street, watching her through the window. She was laughing, helping a little girl pick out daisies, smiling like the last few weeks never happened, and for the first time in his life Elias felt fear. What if she was better off without him? Still, he stepped inside. A bell rang above the door. She turned. Their eyes met. Her smile vanished. "Hi," he said softly. Marla didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, arms folded, guarding herself. "I'm not here to drag you back," he said. "I just needed to see you, to tell you something I didn't get to say." Her jaw clenched slightly. Elias said, "I love you," he interrupted. "Not as Elias Thorne, not as the billionaire, as the guy who mopped the floors and waited for your leftovers every night. I love you because you're real, Because you saw through me before anyone else did. She stared at him, her face unreadable. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, and if you never want to see me again, I'll walk out that door right now. But I needed you to know I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding behind money or titles, just me. Marla stepped around the counter, slowly, arms still crossed. You broke something when you hid from me, she said, her voice quiet. But you also taught me something, that people, even ones like you, can feel just as lost as the rest of us. He nodded. I was more lost than you'll ever know. She looked at him. Really looked. Then she sighed. You owe me. Dinner, she said. His heart jumped. I'll cook this time, he said quickly. She raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? I've improved, he grinned. Microwave and all. A laugh slipped from her lips, the first one in weeks, and just like that, something cracked open between them. Not fixed, not perfect, but honest. Outside, the sky was dimming and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. For the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne wasn't thinking about stocks or boardrooms. He was thinking about daisies, home-cooked meals, and the woman who had reminded him how to be human. Elias kept his word. He returned the next evening, not with a personal chef or catered meal, but with a grocery bag full of burnt toast, questionable spaghetti, and a half-frozen dessert from the gas station. Marla laughed so hard she nearly cried. God help me, she muttered as she stirred the sauce herself, taking over like a drill sergeant. You're a billionaire and still cook like a college dropout. He leaned against the counter, smiling. This is progress. Last month I set off a fire alarm with a microwave burrito. They ate on her porch, no bodyguards, no reporters, just cicadas humming in the background and the smell of fresh basil from her aunt's garden. Conversation flowed easily. She asked about his past, not the press version, but the real one. His childhood, growing up with a father who worshipped power and a mother who vanished when he was 10. How he taught himself code at 13. How he'd bought and sold 3 companies before he was 25 and lost himself completely by 30. He told her things he hadn't even told himself, and she listened, really listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. Just let the silence hold space when the words got too heavy. I spent my whole life proving I could build something no one could tear down, he said. Turns out it wasn't worth much when I was the one tearing it down from the inside. Marla took his hand gently. Maybe what you built wasn't wrong. You just forgot to build yourself with it. He stared at her for a long moment. How did she always find the truth buried under his mess? That night, as he drove back to the city, he didn't feel powerful or brilliant, just grateful. But peace never lasts long for men like Elias. The press had been waiting. Like sharks circling a bleeding seal, they were watching, listening, waiting for a fresh headline. And Marla? She had unknowingly stepped into the center of the storm. The next morning, her flower shop phone rang non-stop. Reporters, paparazzi, tabloids. A few even showed up in person, shoving microphones at her, asking how it felt to tame the billionaire or be the Cinderella of Thorntech. Her aunt was furious. You didn't ask for this. He brought this mess to our door. Marla felt cornered, torn. She didn't regret reconnecting with Elias, but the attention was too much. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think. A tabloid even published an old photo of her from years ago, one she'd hoped no one would ever see again. A messy breakup, a legal fight, things she had buried deep. She didn't want the world to know her like this. She wasn't a fairy tale. She was a woman trying to make it through life without losing herself in someone else's chaos. She called Elias that night, her voice shaky. I can't do this, Eli, the cameras, the lies. People think I'm with you for your money. I'll make it stop, he said quickly. I'll pay them off, get lawyers. No, she interrupted. That's not the point. I don't want to be protected like some secret. I want to live without feeling like your shadow. I want to be seen for who I am, not who I'm dating. Elias was silent for a moment. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need space, she whispered. Not because I don't love you, but because I need to breathe without the world breathing down my neck. He felt the words cut, deep, but he understood. I'll wait, he said. "I don't know how long," she replied. "I'll still wait." They hung up. Outside, the city glowed with headlines and neon lights. Inside, Elias sat in silence, feeling like the richest man in the world with a heart full of nothing but her absence. He had fallen in love the moment he lost everything. Now, the world was giving it all back. But he didn't want it. Not without. Weeks passed. Elias didn't hear from Marla. Not a text, not a call, not even a forwarded meme, which in her world meant emotional silence. But he didn't chase. He remembered her words, space. He gave it to her, even if it felt like drowning in still water. In the meantime, he tried to use his pain for something better. He launched a new initiative, Thorn Ground Up, a program to hire, train and support janitors, maintenance workers, cleaners and caretakers. Not just lip service, real structured growth, healthcare, education reimbursements, pathways into management. Start with the people who see the world's dirt, he told his team, because they're the only ones who truly understand how to clean it. The press labeled it a redemption arc. He didn't care about the headlines anymore. At board meetings, he no longer wore his expensive suits. He listened more, spoke less. The people around him noticed. His assistant, who'd been with him for years, quietly said, "You seem lighter somehow." But at night, the silence returned. Her silence. Until one Thursday, he found a package at his apartment door. No return address. Inside was a small flower pot, lavender, with a folded note tucked in the soil. "This one doesn't need much, just time, care and no spotlight. M." His hands trembled slightly as he held the pot, staring at the single sprout just breaking the soil's surface. She was reaching out. He didn't push, didn't call. Instead, every day he watered that little plant, talked to it like a fool. Let it remind him that sometimes love didn't shout, it whispered, grew slow, needed patience. Then, one night, he got a call from her aunt. Marla's flower shop was vandalized. He was already out the door before she even finished the sentence. When he arrived, the shop's front windows were smashed. Spray paint slashed across the walls. Gold digger, janitor lover, fake. Marla stood in the middle of the mess, sweeping glass with a quiet, mechanical calm. Her aunt argued with the cops outside, voice sharp and fierce. But Marla didn't speak, didn't cry, until she saw Elias. Then her shoulders collapsed. He crossed the room and pulled her into his chest. She didn't resist. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, holding her tight. "I never wanted this for you." "It's not your fault," she mumbled. "People just need something to hate." "Let them hate me," he said, "not you. I can't keep living in the shadow of your name," she whispered. "I'll erase it." She looked up at him. "What?" "I'm selling Thorntech, everything, the board, the stock, my shares. I'm walking away from it." Marla's eyes widened. "That's insane." "No, what's insane is realizing that I've finally found the one thing money can't buy, and then letting it slip through my fingers again. But your legacy is poison," he said, "and I'm done letting it decide who I get to be." They stood in the broken shop, the scent of smashed roses and fresh soil in the air, surrounded by shattered glass and broken words painted in hate. But all Elias saw was her, and in her eyes, for the first time in weeks, he saw something soft again. Not forgiveness, maybe. Not yet, but hope. That night they sat together in silence, fixing the window frame piece by piece. No PR team, no assistants, just two people, side by side, trying to rebuild something worth saving. 2 weeks after the vandalism, Elias Thorn was no longer the CEO of Thorntech. The headlines exploded. "Billionaire quits empire for love? Elias Thorn sells fortune, vanishes from public eye. Thorntech restructures after shock resignation." But behind the noise, the truth was quiet, personal. Elias had signed the paperwork in a plain office with no press, no cameras. The deal was simple. A full buyout, his shares sold to a rising tech equity firm. He took just enough to live, to start small again. The rest was turned into something bigger, a silent trust for those who'd never get headlines. Janitors, single mothers, hospital cleaners, factory workers, the real backbone of the world. And then he disappeared. Not into hiding, into life. He moved to the same small town Marla called home, found a modest place near the hills, started volunteering at a local community center. He helped paint fences, fix roofs. His hands got dirty again, and this time he didn't mind at all. Marla didn't take him back right away. She'd visit, sometimes. Talk to him when they ran into each other at the store. Slowly the conversations got longer, the silences less awkward. She saw him, really saw him, not as Elias the fallen billionaire, but as Eli, the man who now swept his own porch and bought discount detergent without blinking. One evening, after a long shift at the flower shop, she knocked on his door. He opened it surprised. She held up 2 plastic containers. "I brought dinner, and no, you're not cooking," he grinned. "Microwave trauma still fresh, huh?" "Permanent damage," she teased, stepping in. They ate on the back porch overlooking the quiet stretch of grass and trees. No paparazzi, no flashing lights, just 2 people and the gentle hum of cicadas. After dinner, Marla looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I've been angry," she said. He nodded. "You had every right. And scared." "I know. But I never stopped loving you," she said, her voice small, "even when I hated how you made me feel." He stared at her, heart thudding. "I never expected forgiveness." "I'm not offering forgiveness," she said, setting down her fork. "I'm offering a second chance." His breath caught. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small, the lavender pot he'd once received. The sprout had grown now, thick and leafy, with a single purple bloom stretching proudly toward the light. "You didn't kill it," she smiled. "I tried talking to it every day," he said sheepishly. "That's all love really needs, Eli," she whispered. "Consistency, patience, a little bit of sunlight." He took her hand gently. No grand speeches, no promises, just a quiet look that said everything. They sat in silence until the stars blinked into view above them. And in that moment, Elias Thorne, the man once envied by millions, realized he didn't miss the fortune, or the fame, or the power. He missed nothing at all. Because everything he ever needed was sitting right beside him, barefoot on his porch, with a plastic container full of cold spaghetti and a flower that refused to die. A year passed. The world moved on. The media found new billionaires to chase, new scandals to chew through. Thorntech changed hands again, watered down by layers of corporate greed. But no one really talked about Elias Thorne anymore, and that was exactly how he wanted it. In a sleepy town far from the towers of glass, and Gold Elias spent his days with his hands in the earth and his heart at peace. He and Marla didn't rush things. Love, after all, was a seed, not a spark. And they'd both learned that the hard way. By spring, the flower shop had not only recovered, it had doubled in size. Marla started offering classes on floral therapy, drawing people in from neighboring towns. Elias built her a small greenhouse behind the shop with his own hands. It wasn't perfect. The first wall collapsed twice. But when it finally stood upright, Marla had kissed him and said, "This is the most beautiful crooked thing I've ever seen." Their relationship had grown into something solid. No more guessing. No more tests. Just real, unpolished life. They shared mornings, her with her tea, him with cheap coffee. Sometimes they said nothing at all, just sat in the quiet with the wind rustling the trees. On one of those mornings, Elias stood on the porch, staring at the old lavender plant. It had bloomed again, fuller this time. Its scent mixed with the warm air, and he found himself smiling. Marla stepped out beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Remember when you almost killed that thing?" He chuckled. "I think it kept growing out of spite." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "So, I've been thinking. Dangerous words. I want to expand," she said. "Open a second shop, maybe one in the city, but only if you're okay with that." He blinked. "You want to go back?" "Not to that life," she said. "Just on my terms. I want people to know you don't have to wear a suit or own a skyscraper to have worth. I want to show them what love looks like when no one's pretending." He turned toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Whatever you need, wherever you go, and I'll be there." "I know," she whispered. Later that summer, they stood in the middle of a small field just outside town, a piece of land they'd bought together with the last of Elias's remaining funds. No mansions, no security gates, just wildflowers. And sky. They weren't engaged, not yet. They didn't need rings or ceremonies to prove what they already lived every day. But that night, under a blanket of stars, Elias looked at her and said, "I once had the whole world at my feet, and still felt empty." Marla smiled gently. "And now?" He took her hand, kissed it softly. "Now I've got dirt under. My nails, a crooked greenhouse, and a woman who makes me feel like home." She leaned into him, eyes shining. "That's the only kind of rich that matters." And as the night wrapped around them like a quiet promise, they stood in the middle of everything that was real. No legacy, no headlines, no lies. Just love, the kind that grows even in the dark, even when the world isn't watching. The kind you never have to buy.